Nenuca Syquia, and I am one of the founders and the CEO of Better Organizations by Design. Better Organizations by Design, or Boxed, as we like to call it, is a consulting firm that focuses on helping growing companies figure out how they grow sustainably, meaning sustaining their performance for the long haul, and equitably. So I'm here to talk to you today about how you can go beyond diversity, equity, and inclusion training to drive the kind of changes that you want in your organization. And before I go into how we go about doing that at Boxed, I wanted to give you a little bit of food for thought. So DEI training, it's meant to generate awareness, equip people with skills. It is certainly extremely important because without knowing how to do things, people will struggle. But I put forward this thought for you to think about too, which is a bad system will beat a good person every single time. So we can have our people with the best of intentions, but unless the system around them changes, it will be very difficult for their behavior and therefore the outcomes to change. So when we talk about equipping and embedding organizations with diversity, equity, inclusion, these are the three pieces that we really think about. The first is around equipping your leaders. So your leaders in your organization, they are the decision makers in terms of what goes forward and what does not. And by virtue of their position in the organization, they too are shaping the system. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And finally, they are role models for people in the organization. Because they are leaders, their behaviors are extremely visible. Their words carry far more weight. So before we embark on serious change efforts as they relate to DEI, we equip leaders to embrace these separate roles. And then on the upper right-hand side are evolving the organizational systems. And this, we talk about changing your business processes, looking at your talent practices, even how the company is organized, what metrics you use to measure success, not just as they relate to DEI, but even including business effectiveness. Talk about the roles that you have in the organization. That's your whole organizational system. And the last bucket that we take a look at is your teams. So we equip the leaders to make the right decisions. We evolve the organizational systems, and then we expand your team's capacity to act with more inclusion. And this means allowing them to exchange in dialogue. So equipping them both with the skills and encouraging them to engage in the dialogue and providing the space for that to occur. And then we also change the ways that teams work, the rituals in which they engage, so that they are embedding inclusion in the ways that they work. I want to talk to you briefly too about how these things are all related to each other. So as it relates to leaders and systems, I had said earlier, your leaders are your decision makers. So by equipping your leaders with an understanding of DEI related issues and the impact these have on the organization, it will help them then determine and prioritize the changes as they relate to your organizational systems. They will decide which initiatives we should be putting money against, when we should be doing them. They're the ones who determine how the whole company is organized. In turn, your organizational systems, remember the quote that I had posted earlier, they will drive and reinforce your leaders' behaviors. So it's a mutually exchanging chain. Same thing with your teams. Your teams are the ones that will bring the organizational changes to life. So leaders determine this is the path that we're going to take. Who executes? Your teams. And so they're the ones responsible for evolving the actual organizational systems. And similar to the leaders, as they're operating, doing their work in this system, the system drives and reinforces their own behaviors. And lastly, what is the relationship between the leaders and teams? One is leaders will create the environment for their teams. They're the ones who set the standard. So engaging in dialogue, setting expectations in terms of behaviors. They're the ones who create that environment. And then the mutual relationship between leaders and teams is accountability. Teams will hold their leaders accountable. Leaders will hold their teams accountable. And in the process of engaging with one another, that's how they start learning together. And this is how we talk about embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion into the ways of working, going far beyond training.